What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I've got in front of you guys today the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 Compact. Now this is a very new release onto the market, and a lot of people have been very excited about this firearm. M&Ps have been around for quite some time, and they've long been contenders to a lot of the other popular firearms out on the market. But one gap existed within this format or this platform, and that was really a traditional compact size that is reminiscent of perhaps something like a Glock 19. I bet a lot of you were thinking about that. And that's very much true. They definitely had the 9C, which is a little bit smaller in size, so a little bit closer to subcompact, although not quite. And then they had their full-size 4 1/4 and even a 5-inch barrel model, but nothing really is a contender to the traditional platform. So that brings us here to today with the 2.0 Compact. And I was excited to get my hands on this, although admittedly skeptical at first, because if you've seen my initial videos on the 2.0 full-size in the 4 1/4 format, I didn't connect with it very well. So I had some reservations about this, so I'm excited to share with you my experience with this firearm. I'll be bringing that one in periodically just as a comparison, that sort of thing. But anyway, so from a spec standpoint, the overall length of the firearm is 7.3 inches. The height is 5 inches. The barrel length is 4 inches. The width of the firearm, now I did measure the width myself at 1.29 inches because Smith & Wesson does not report that. And I took that measurement at the widest point, including the slide lock slide releases on both sides. The weight unloaded is 26.6 ounces. Once again, that's my weight, not Smith & Wesson. They say 25.3 ounces, but when I put this in with an unloaded magazine in my digital scale over and over again, I get 26.6 ounces. So they might be measuring it without the magazine. Your mileage may vary there. Speaking of magazines, it does come with two 15-round magazines, one of the most substantial changes to the Compact, rather than 17-round magazines. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. And we'll also talk about some additions to the accessories that come in the box with the Compact. Now, of course, the slide on this is still an Armor Night finish, just like you would expect with Smith & Wesson's, and the frame is a polymer frame as always. So from a feature standpoint, the features are largely similar with its larger brother. One thing I have noticed, however, and the most outstanding feature, I think, for a lot of people with the 2.0 is the aggressiveness of the grip texture. And I've noted in previous videos that I think it's a very aggressive texture. Not so much that it's not able to be handled, not at all. I mean, it's certainly, I would equate this to a custom stipple job and a very good one. And the gun certainly stays very planted while shooting, and that remains true with the Compact. I have some reservations from a carry standpoint, although I'm looking forward to some stories from you guys and your experience with carrying and whether this can beat up clothing or skin or anything like that, because I haven't had that experience just yet. I haven't carried this firearm, just to be transparent with you. I do have plans to do so over the winter, though. So some other features about the grip. Of course, the back straps are interchangeable just like its older brother. You do get 4 in the box, so a lot of opportunity to customize that grip. Another thing that's really nice, they do have a couple of indentions here at the bottom of the frame on both sides, and this helps to clear any malfunctions if need be. Just makes that a little bit easier. And it does also come with a small tool. These things are always a little bit finicky to get out. But this little tool, this actually also will allow you to get the back straps off. I'm not going to take that off just yet. But it's kind of nice that they have that tool, and it'll assist in another feature of this firearm here in just a moment. From a magazine release standpoint, it's not ambidextrous out of the box. However, you can flip it around. And another change to the 2.0, they actually made this a metal magazine release. I've always said Smith & Wesson magazine releases, I think they're placed very well. I think they feel good. I think they're very user-friendly and very nice. You really don't have to change your grip hardly at all or at all to get that magazine out of the gun. So I like that feature quite a bit. It does come with your accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, as expected. Now, they did increase or make the steel go just a little bit further into the frame, so it's almost to the very end, almost to the end of the firearm right here, which adds a little bit of rigidity while shooting. I don't know that it necessarily reduces recoil too much or anything like that, but it adds a little bit of weight and rigidity. So it's nice that they did that. I think it's a good feature. I think all polymer firearms ought to have as much steel reinforcement as possible. So the slide lock, slide release is ambidextrous on both sides, and I do say a slide release because they've put it on both sides. I think Honest Outlaw said basically the same thing, and I agree with him. If it's going to be on both sides and textured, you can use it as a release, and you can successfully do so. Now, they did add a detent right here, and from what I understand, the purpose of this, in the old M&P 1.0s, you used to be able to really slam these magazines home, and the slide would just automatically go forward and load around into the chamber. And this, from what I understand, sort of prevents that from happening or locks up that slide lock, slide release, so you can't do that. So if you guys are able to still make that happen on the 2.0s, I'd love to hear about that as well. From a takedown standpoint, very standard for Smith & Wesson. You do lock the slide back just like it is, and then you would pull down your takedown lever, and you can either start putting the slide forward and pull the trigger, or again, you can with a tool, whether it be the little tool here in the grip or something else, a punch or whatever. There's a little tab in there that you can turn down, and then you would be able to take the slide off without pulling the trigger. I don't mind pulling the trigger, it doesn't bother me, but some people it does. So it's nice that they give you the option. So that's really it from a frame standpoint. Oh, I guess there is one other thing. There is a safety model as well. I opted for the no safety. I do not like safeties on polymer firearms. I think there are plenty of internal safeties in there, but you do have that option if it's important to you or if your state requires it. From a slide standpoint, once again, largely unchanged from the 2.0 full size. One thing that I really like, they did scallop the slide just a little bit more in the 2.0 model, so it reduces a little bit of that slide weight, although since we've added a little bit of steel here in the frame, I think it balances it out very nicely, but it also makes it look really nice. I think Smith & Wesson M&Ps are just good-looking guns, if nothing else. Now, they do have the fish scale serrations right here, another thing that I think is very attractive about the firearm, and they are very user-friendly. I think they're tactile, and they're just sharp enough to really be able to get a good bite in there. And they carried those serrations forward to the front of the slide, although I think more for decor than anything else, although you can do some one-handed, press checks, if you will, if you need to. But again, I think it's more for aesthetics than anything else. Either way, it's kind of nice that they're there. That's fine. From a sight perspective, you can expect steel sights out of the box, as you would expect with Smith & Wesson. They are a 3-dot arrangement, and there is just a little bit of a serration here in the back to reduce a little bit of glare. And I think they've improved the paint in the sight as well. I know this is a very small thing, but it's something that I noticed. In the old 1.0s, I noticed a lot of times the paint in these sights would kind of come off pretty quickly. That's not really the case with this, or that I've noticed so far with either of the two models I have. You do have a peephole here to be able to see if there's a round chambered, which is also really nice. So those press checks, although you can still do them, might be a little bit more of a non-issue at that point in time because you can see that round. So that's really it from a feature standpoint. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, and it goes along with the accessories and the magazines in the box, since this is a 15-round magazine, steel magazine that comes with it, your 17-round magazines in not only your big 2.0s, but also your previous generation models will fit as well. And one of the really nice things, although those 17-round magazines are a little bit longer in the firearm, they include a couple of these little magazine sleeves along with it. So basically it makes your 17-round magazines complete the frame or complete the grip, if you will. So you get that full-size grip with those sleeves. I really like that. I think it's nice that they included a couple of those in there so you don't have to go out and spend a little bit more money to do that if it's important to you. It's just a nice touch. So kudos to Smith & Wesson for that. Very good feature. So that's really it from a spec and a feature standpoint. We're going to be taking a look at some shooting here in just a moment. When we come back, of course, we'll take a look at the trigger. I'm also going to bring in its older brother so you can get a little bit of a comparison from a size standpoint, how big of a difference it is from the compact to the full size. See you in a few. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, the compact did well. In fact, it did significantly better than the full size did, especially on my first outing. And I put 250 rounds through the compact, just like I did with the full size on its first outing. And I had some conversations with my buddy Big Johnson Guns and Gear, and I've got a link to his channel down below. He's one of my cohorts on the Wednesday night chats. Be sure to join us there as well, along with 1776 or Bust. But Big Johnson and I were talking about, believe it or not, frame size, and that makes sense for the context of this conversation here. And he was mentioning that although the difference is very slight between the full size and the compact, you do get just a little bit more grip on the compact. And for a shooter like me that spends a lot more time with compact, subcompact, and even single stack firearms, that little bit of difference in control in the grip and the amount of grip you can get on the frame can actually potentially make a big difference. And at first I kind of thought, I don't really know about that. But the more and more I thought about it, I think he has a great point. And perhaps that's why I actually connected with the compact remarkably better than I did with the full size. Now, this was not precision shooting by any stretch, and I wouldn't have expected that, especially for the first run out of the box. But from the very first shots to the last of the 250 rounds, the gun was pretty consistent. It wasn't pulling to the right or to the left, up or down consistently. It was really hitting center target. And any of the misses I attribute to my shooting defensive style rather than the gun itself. So I definitely did connect better, and I think it really probably was because of the size of the grip. It just fits in my hand a little better. It's a little bit more comfortable for me. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that as well. So from a trigger perspective, very similar. In fact, I'm going to get rid of the full size now. I think we're done with it for the time being. The trigger is largely unchanged from the compact to the full size, but Smith & Wesson has definitely made some enhancements to the trigger. Now, in the first video I had with the full size, I marked that the trigger had some pretty significant grit to it. Now, it's largely worked itself out, which is great. I did find that the compact had some grit in it as well. However, with some dry fire practice and then those rounds at the range, it has by and large cleaned itself up. I mean, it still makes some sounds, and there's still a tiny bit of grit in there, but it's not too bad. And once you start going, you don't really notice it too much. It is not the smoothest trigger out there, I will be honest with you, but it feels reasonably good. Now, it is a hinged trigger design, so it's not the safety dingus like some other firearms, if that means anything to you. But once we get to our uptake there, and it's a fairly long uptake, I will say, but then we get to a nice wall. And there's our break, and it's a reasonably clean break. It's not the best out there in the market, and I know this gets into trigger snobbery just a little bit, but it's a decent break nonetheless. And then our reset, is more audible and more tactile, certainly, than the M&P 2.0 or 1.0 rather, although certainly not best in class by any stretch of the imaginations, but it's serviceable, it's good enough. And then we get back out to the start. So I will do that again. There's our uptake and our wall. Our break, and there's our reset, and we're back out to the start. So from a trigger perspective, it's certainly workable. It's not the best out there, but it's okay. Now, if you follow my channel for any length of time, you know that I tend to wrap my finger around. My fingers are just a little bit too long for the pad of my finger to be comfortable. And actually, on this type of firearm, I don't think it's very comfortable with the pad of my finger regardless because of this hinged design. Now, I know you're going to say, well, put an Apex trigger in it, and I may at some point in time. But I like to test production firearms. That's what this channel is really about, at least at first. So for me, wrapping it around is far more comfortable, but then I have to be considerate of my grip because the finger can kind of get in the way there. However, again, on the compact, I found that not to be too big of an issue. So good on Smith & Wesson for that. Now, I guess one other thing I was going to do, and I haven't done it yet, so I need to bring the full size back out for just a moment or two. And keep in mind, this again is the 4 1/4 here. I'm going to try and get this in the frame as best I can, although it can be kind of hard to do. To give you an idea of the difference in length, so I've got these guys butt to butt, so they're definitely lined up. But if you can tell, the compact on the left is about 1/4 of an inch difference at the 4-inch barrel rather than the 4 1/4 inch barrel, so that makes pretty good sense. So not a substantial difference between slide lengths. Where I think the bigger difference, of course, is going to be is in the length, and I don't have the measurement right now on the full size with me, but I'm looking at somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch in grip length difference there. So it's not a lot, but I think it's enough to make a difference if you are a little bit more sensitive to the size of the grip of a firearm, perhaps like I am. I don't know. I didn't really think about that until Big Johnson said something. Thanks, Big Johnson, for bringing that up. But it's probably true. So that's it for the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 Compact. I will say I have been far more impressed for my intents and purposes and connecting with this shooter right here than I was with the full-size firearm. So I'm excited that Smith & Wesson brought this out, and I'm looking forward to continuing to test and also bring this in with some if I could only have ones with a few other notable pistols out there on the market right now. So looking forward to your comments on this. Once again, be sure to join us on Wednesday nights. Everybody's links are down below, and be sure to subscribe to those guys, and be sure to check out Abaddon Apparel as well for all of your Second Amendment apparel needs, including shirts from my channel right here. Believe it or not, I do have shirts, but wander around that website a little bit. It's kind of fun. So again, looking forward to those comments. Thanks once again for joining me, and I will see you next time.
I was just so far from here, focused on my